everyone, my name is Neil Mitra, founder and CEO of Mitra Biotechnologies, where we're building the transistor for diagnostic biology, enabling tests to be 10 times faster and 1,000 times lower cost for rapid point of care applications.
Beautiful. And we'll be talking a lot more about Mitra technologies throughout the course of this episode for all the biochemistry and biomedical geeks listening to the episode. But yes, this is Neil Mitra. He's a junior at UBC, so the University of British Columbia, located in Vancouver, Canada. He's majoring in biomedical engineering while parallelly running a highly successful venture called Mitra Technologies. So we'll be diving a lot deeper into how he's managing the two on this episode. But today we'll be learning more from Neil about the choices he's made, the lessons he's learned along the way, as well as his advice to young high schoolers like yourself who are listening to the episode as you prepare for this super exciting roller coaster of a ride that we call university. So welcome to my podcast, University Unraveled. I'm your host, Arya Zaror, currently studying at Minerva University. Welcome, Neil, and such a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure as well. Yeah.
Would love to begin with, you already gave us a sneak peek, but would love to hear a little more from you about Mitra Technologies, your startup. So if you can just walk listeners through a brief overview of the company, what's the mission, what problem are you solving for, and what stage of building are you currently at?
Yeah, for sure. So what we do on a more technical level is we've built these nanomaterial integrated paper-based systems that enable any sort of diagnostic company to rapidly detect multiple biomarkers parallelly on paper. Currently, the best paper-based diagnostics, they can maybe detect one or two biomarkers at the same time parallelly, and it's done in a very like hard to execute manner. There's very few tests which can do more than one biomarker, especially protein biomarker or antigen marker, at the same time on a lateral flow assay format. So the format that COVID-19 assays use, they're one of the most highly deployable assays globally. There's about 3 billion of those sold every single year in terms of just unit devices. And right now, the industry is stuck on figuring out a way, how can we make any protein marker blood test to be within a lateral flow assay form factor. And that's pretty much what our technology enables anyone to do. It helps them to convert any of their existing assays, entire like laboratory pipelines within this assay format that you can rapidly deploy. And we've solved the multiplexing issue within these devices. We can detect between 6 to 10 markers parallelly at the same time in one device. So that's pretty much the technology that we've built. In terms of the stage of the company, we're still early stage. We raised our pre-seed round of funding last year. And now we're pretty much focused on R&D. We hit a few recent major technical milestones, so we're advancing forward day by day. So yeah.
Beautiful. And I feel like I'm a good person to host, especially for the non-bio people listening to the podcast, because I'm not a biology person myself. So I might be asking you some very basic and simple questions, but hopefully that also makes this episode accessible to the non-bio people. Where did the idea come from? Was it just something from your mind, something from a research paper you read? You've clearly defined the problem statement and you've given us the statistics, but where did that aha moment sort of come from?
Yeah, it was definitely a process. Like when this company first started, like what got me interested in the space as a whole was when I was in high school. My close one passed away due to a heart attack when I was in my freshman year of high school. So in my when I was in grade 10/sophomore year, I just cold emailed a bunch of professors at the University of Waterloo. I'm from Waterloo originally, and I just cold emailed them asking them if I could go work in their labs. A few of them responded, decided to go with the few. Started pretty much at the time I was just trying to make a science fair project that could demonstrate a device that could detect and predict heart attacks in less than 5 minutes for $1. That was pretty much the objective. And we went to like a proof of concept stage where I could prove that, and I did national and international science fairs, won gold in both, and then I decided to start the company. When I started the company, I also got a full ride scholarship offer from UBC to go study biomedical engineering, which had a pretty good biomedical engineering program. So I decided to go with that. So I moved over to Vancouver, and I'd say really in my first year of university, that's when most of the business stuff started to kick off. And after our pre-seed round of funding, we realized quickly that targeting heart attack detection and especially selling a device like that could be very challenging to bring into the market if we just focused on one marker. So we decided to focus more on a platform approach, gradually going towards more of a volume business as the years carried on. So that's pretty much like I guess like the journey. So we've sort of been through one major pivot in the company in terms of our plan or pivot in the project as a whole. So we've yeah, that's pretty much how the company's been doing.
Lovely. And I'm sure a lot of even university students listening to the podcast are interested in doing research under a professor, but sort of maybe not sure how to make the ask or how to reach out. You reached out in high school itself to professors at the University of Waterloo, which is not even the school you're currently going to. Um, what was the ask? Like, what was the content? If I know this is way back, but what did you even write in that cold email to the professors? Like, how did you get some of them to actually respond?
Yeah. So I'd say there's like the major way that I structured them was pretty much talk about um at the time I had this other project which was like to aid visually impaired individuals in navigation. And I started a venture based off of that, and I filed a few patents based off of that. And describing what I had done in the past sort of gave a good signal overall in terms of this guy. There's a very low probability he will blow up the lab or something if we let him in. So we decided to. So I think that's primarily the main reason why they responded. And I also included my CV to that email as well as like a short, like 2 or 3 sentences on what I aim to do. And yeah, I just sort of send that out to as many like emails that I could find for professors, which is like a decent number. You can probably send, you can cold outreach any professor really. So it was pretty easy to like find professors to cold outreach to. Um, yeah, yeah,
I think it's a numbers game, honestly. As it is with applying to internships, is just you have to reach out to a ton, and maybe a few will respond, and out of those, maybe a few will allow you to actually work in the lab. So it's just a funnel, but you have to start with a very wide net, like casting that very wide net. So it sounds like something you've done. Um, wanna you mentioned you're on a full ride at UBC for biomedical. Um, Two parts to the question, and feel free to tackle them one by one. One, how did the interest and the passion emerge for biomedical? How did you know that this is something you wanted to pursue? And two, apart, I'm sure the scholarship was a big pull factor to UBC. But other than that, just for somebody who's interested in applying to UBC for a course like yours, um, what's special or unique about UBC's biomedical course?
certainly. So to answer your first question in terms of why I believe that biomedical engineering was something that had high alignment with, when I was a kid, I really enjoyed, well, actually, more of a precursor to this. My family's originally from India, and when I was a little kid, we used to go visit my grandparents who lived in India. And I think from an early age, I could catch the differences between Canada's healthcare system and India's
Mm.
healthcare system. My uncle there in India is a cardiologist, so I started to pretty much like see very clearly what the differences would be like. Could see the disparity in between them, and that sort of drove me internally a lot. And yeah, I found out that I was generally good at math and science in school, and I liked it. Um, and it wasn't really until I'd say like my first year of university that I began to have like very high conviction in terms of like especially what the company was doing in applied physics. Broadly speaking, I began to develop a strong interest in that. So I think um, even throughout high school, like I wouldn't say that was particularly like I loved biology and I was good at physics, math, and chemistry and whatnot. But I wouldn't say that I particularly loved those subjects in high school as much. But then at university, yeah, those were the subjects that I loved the most, especially physics. I found it to be very, very fun and enjoyable. Um, so I still say like biomedical engineering. I like it because I can apply a whole bunch of applied physics methods um, and methodologies towards biology in order to create these devices that are on a fundamental level like significantly better than what the current alternatives are. So that was like the primary motivating factor behind studying biomedical engineering. Going into it, I just like biology and I like math as a whole, and I was like, you know, it'll be cool to like combine the two. So biomedical engineering made sense from there. In
Mm.
terms of UBC on a more practical perspective, every single major Canadian life sciences unicorn has spun out of UBC. Some notable names include Apcellera and Aspect Biosystems in the past like 2 decades or so. Aspect, I think, has been like the past decade. There's also Precision Nanosystems, Biomedical. Like there's plenty of companies, like as well as smaller ones too, who are going towards that unicorn stage. Um, so that was like a very positive signal. They have an excellent. They have like I'd say like Waterloo Velocity is probably like the number one in the country right now in terms of startup accelerators, but I'd say UBC is catching up pretty close towards it. It's going to take them a while before we can see the results on the market, but I think in terms of deep tech, UBC is really well positioned to be a dominant player, especially because what I liked about UBC a lot that I could get from the very beginning is that it's a university which allows you to sort of reach out to anyone that you want within the university, and I think I was also in a fortunate position with the full ride scholarship that I could leverage that much quickly. And it's a university that likes to move fast within the research and translational field, which is always a good signal, especially if you're trying to translate something from the lab to the market. The curriculum is excellent at UBC for biomedical engineering. It's rigorous. It's definitely learned a whole bunch there, and I'd say I'd say like the interesting thing about UBC's biomedical engineering curriculum is that I'd say that the community that you're part of is very research oriented. Like in fact, the School of Biomedical Engineering, out of any other, at least to my knowledge, it's one of the like highest like research generating departments in all of UBC. So like it's a department which is combined like it's backed by both the Faculty of Medicine as well as the Faculty of Applied Sciences. So we get tons of research funding towards some of these cool projects that we're doing, and the research out of the Zanstra lab or the Nosoma lab is just it's like it's very, very incredible. And there's a bunch of PIs who are actively also being recruited from other places, as well as like PIs who are already been recruited who are just quite exemplary in what they do. So I'd say it's a sort of hidden university, I guess. I'd say in my opinion, still a bit underrated, especially for biomedical engineering. I'd say the only other program which is like also very, very good there is there's plenty of programs which are good, but the one other program that sticks out at UBC is engineering physics. That one's also a very like a lot of people who founded these unicorns have been engineering physics alumni. So there's also that program.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, as an international student, I feel like UOFT and Waterloo and McGill are probably the top three big names, which let's say my friends are interested in. But from what you're saying, sounds like you've got great opportunities, especially for someone interested in the life sciences, wanting to go deeper into research and get that funding, build companies. Sounds like this is a good option.
Yeah, I mean, I think with like Waterloo is a great engineering school, but I'd say it's excellent if you want to do anything in computer science, software engineering, and computer engineering, maybe, then Waterloo is the place to go. For literally anything else, you're probably better off at U of T, McGill, or UBC. The reason for this is because Waterloo is fundamentally a really good Silicon Valley-esque research, like a Silicon Valley-esque university. Uh, they're excellent at producing talent without a doubt, but this is a function of their own selectivity filter when they select for applicants from a young age, from like when you're applying to high school. Like acceptance rates are much higher at UBC and U of T, whereas Waterloo selects like fewer students. I got into Waterloo, but I decided not to go because it was also just that was also primary thesis level reason because Waterloo does not have incredibly good research within certain fields outside of the software and math space. So you're you're better off going to like U of T or UBC if you're doing literally anything else besides software. Um, and that's why Waterloo has such a good name in Silicon Valley because like everyone who is good from software at Waterloo is likely better than most students at like Stanford or MIT. And like it's undoubtedly it's one of the best programs in the world when it comes to anything related to software. But for anything else, you're just better off at. You'll learn more and you'll be able to apply more research skills at UBC or U of T. But then again, there's an argument towards Waterloo because it's better at translating things overall from the lab to the market. So there's also that argument, which is valid. So I think it's a hard matrix to sort of optimize for. It sort of depends on what you want to learn. If you care more about learning first principles and fundamentals, then you're probably better off at UBC or U of T than you are at Waterloo. So there's that.
Would love to hear more about the accelerator program at UBC and how you've been involved with it specifically and what kind of value it's added to a venture like yours.
Yeah. So I'd say on a physical level, UBC, the entrepreneurial UBC and Hatch Venture Builder provides lab space as well as like free office space, which is great for ventures. They have a bunch of, and I guess on a more macro level, they have a bunch of mentors as well who've like previously scaled companies and stuff like that, and they're really good in terms of hashing out what the initial steps would be in terms of translation to the market. In terms of yeah, I would say that's like the major thing about UBC. It's like a great way to leverage very quickly. There's a great way to know everybody within the ecosystem, especially in Canada, and it's sort of like a really good shortcut to knowing the fundamentals of, broadly speaking, like what you should be considering when you're building a deep tech company. So.
I'm curious if there was specific help with mentorship, like if specific professors actually went on board with your idea and are mentoring you either from the business side or even from your biotech and the technical side.
Yeah, we actually have several. So on both the technical as well as like the business side. So yeah, like there's like entrepreneurship at UBC is like very well connected, especially with professors, because like professors at UBC they also translate a lot of their work. So there's a bunch of startups, especially in the School of Biomedical Engineering, where it's just like professor's company. It's just translating things to the market. So yeah, you definitely have like really good one-on-one. You can get really good one-on-one time with them if it's needed for your company.
Beautiful. To wrap up this first initial section of the podcast, any specific advice or wisdom or insight you'd like to give to an international high schooler who's thinking of applying to UBC?
But broadly speaking, UBC for Canadian, like for domestic applicants, it's very like it's not like U of T and UBC. The best way to describe these two schools is that like it's pretty easy to get into them. It's not so hard to get out of them. Their graduation, like it's especially for engineering and stuff. Like they tend to have very rigorous programs, and compared to U.S. universities, they're sort of quite ruthless on the mark of like, yeah, they will fail you if you're not performing. Like it's very black and white to that extent. So in comparison to like some schools that I know in the U.S., like there's barely any grade inflation. You don't get graded on curves, nothing like that. It's like raw score is your raw score. So it definitely gets challenging for some students. So
okay, good to know. And that's an insider tip from someone who's going through the process themselves. So this is why I love getting students from these universities on the podcast. Is some of the things we'll say here today just very difficult to find online if someone Googles. Um, would love to move on to this was a beautiful section on your startup. It was interesting to know the motivation behind biomedical, behind UBC, some specific insights into UBC itself. Would love to fast forward a little bit and move to your UBC journey specifically. First question I'd like to ask, I'm sure this must be on everyone's mind, is you're doing a very rigorous biomedical program at UBC, plus running a successful venture on the side. Would just love if you could talk through how you've been managing your time and balancing the two, because I'm sure they're both very high priority and high leverage for you.
Mm-hmm. So I would say, like, again, broad 100,000 feet overview. It's like R&D and talking to customers are the two major things that you're doing. And at least within UBC, I would say that in my personal experience, I've been able to do things much faster than if I weren't within the UBC ecosystem. Um, and primary reason for that is because it's such a good interplay of research as well as like learning fundamentals. And those fundamentals get reapplied to the company and which sort of gets feeded back. Um, so yeah, I'd say in terms of a more mechanics overview in terms of how this works on my day to day, I sort of ensure that I have enough time to do everything in the day, and the way that I manage that is just like by using Google Calendar. Just have a rough idea of what I need to do when. Um, and I think overall, just being highly agentic about what you want to get done helps. Um, so yeah, I think I also really enjoy university, which is like something that is not a very popular opinion these days.
Mhm.
I enjoy doing theory. I don't dislike it at all, and it's been like, I mean, I actually do love it a lot in terms of like how the university structure is done. Um, the pace of learning is fast, and that's what I need in order to not like slack off. Pretty much, I like fast paced learning environments, so a university is great for that. And yeah, like I'd say overall, like it's definitely like a lot of work. Like I think, um, like on a fundamental scale, like if you put it on paper, like working 16, 18 hours a day is like that's like a lot of work, but it doesn't feel like that much if you're just having fun doing it. So
Mm.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I'd say overall I enjoy it, and I think when you're very focused and quote unquote locked in on how you're performing, it's just yeah, like sometimes I just don't really even think the fact that I'm in university. It doesn't feel like I am. It just feels like I'm just like learning a bunch. So it's yeah.
Mm. Let's dive deeper into one aspect. I remember you also mentioned this to me when we had a previous conversation, which I found very interesting, is that as someone who's building a venture in deep tech, it really doesn't make too much sense to drop out, because my learning at university is supplementing the R&Ds and the technical breakthroughs, which I'm making with my venture. I know a lot of people who start successful ventures during the university just are very happy to drop out and just build further. But curious if you could just say more on that. Why do you feel it's so important to
So
all?
I guess this is more context dependent. So I think for me, it makes more sense. I think for others, uh, it's dependent on them, sort of thing. Like I mean, I enjoy it. I think that's like the primary reason why I like it. I think a real reason why people drop out and stuff like that is because they don't enjoy it.
Mm.
Um, and that's fair. Not everybody has to enjoy university. It's not meant as like a thing that everyone has to do either. I think I'm more of a fundamentalist believer in like people pursuing the things that they love to do more than the things that they have to do. And for me, I just happen to really love like learning a bunch of applied physics and applying it towards biomedical engineering. So I think that's my take on it. I think that like it's not impossible to do a deep tech. In fact, like some of my close friends, who I honestly look up to sometimes, or most of the time I look up, let me rephrase. The friends that I look up to who are like around the same age category as me, they've all dropped out. They're all
Mm.
full time, and it is possible to do a deep tech and also like be really successful at it at the same time. I just think for me on an individual level, I just don't think that's right. I
Mm.
don't know. Like that's like I just enjoy university. So yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Um, this
And
is
like I mean the further argument there is like if you're trying to do something like it's just easier to leverage, like especially if you're trying to build a deep tech company. It's just like you're in an environment where you can learn really quickly.
mm,
And you gain a lot of like if you care about getting knowledge outside of your own domain and getting in depth within that in a lot of different domains, that's like a pretty good reason to stay in undergrad. Speaking, so
interesting. Interesting. I'm glad that we dive deep into that. And I think everyone's journey is different. Everyone enjoys university on a different level, but I can feel that you're super passionate about them both. And I'm glad that you've been able to manage both. And I'm sure what you learn from the company helps your education, and what you learn in class helps the company. So I'm sure there's a lot of transfer going on as well. Um, More macro and more broader question: if a high schooler is themselves very entrepreneurial, is aware that after university the intention is to start a startup and run their own venture, how does that influence the way they look at and perceive a university? So depending on whether you feel comfortable, we can talk about Canada, or we can talk even more broadly. But when I'm evaluating a university, is there any way I can tell how the entrepreneurial ecosystem at that university is?
I think this is like just broadly signaling, right? Like everybody knows Waterloo because like signals there is good. Um, like yeah, honestly, it's just signal. Like that's a very vague answer, and I honestly don't have a good answer towards this. I think I had the opportunity to be in a position where I had a good overview in terms of which universities are good and so forth. So I think the best way to do this is just by talking to other founders, getting to know what it's like, talking to people in the valley, et cetera, et cetera. Um, yeah, I'd say it just comes down to basic signaling in terms of the university as a whole. You can also look at like the unicorn output if you want a more quantitative measurement. There is the unicorn list for startups, which talks about the number of unicorns generated.
Mm,
Like how many founders have built a unicorn company from that university, and I think Waterloo is like one of the only Canadian schools in that list. So
mm,
that's why Waterloo is a very strong signal. um, so yeah, or I think they're definitely the highest in Canada. Yeah, highest in Canada, like within the top 10, 15 in the world, easily.
perfect.
Um, which is very, very good for a Canadian university. Like that's pretty excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, that is great for Canadian university. Um, Curious, you can tackle this question as to you specifically, or we can extrapolate out to generally students who are building startups while at university. Are there certain activities which a normal university student would engage in which you skip out on, or are there another certain activities which you dive a lot deeper into, which is just not a focus for a normal university student, someone who's interested in, let's say, being an employee after university?
Hmm. Um, do you mean within the context of academia or outside of academia?
Could be however you take it. We can talk outside the context of academia as well.
Sure. I mean, I would say it's like I think with so if you're an individual who like is entrepreneurial, you have like a natural forcing function to enable you to create your own circle that comprises of people who are within the same wavelength of thinking as you. And
Mm,
this sort of happens naturally. You gravitate towards people who are sort of within the same wavelength, and they can be in university, they can be within the community. Like right now, most of my friends are like the vast majority of my friends are not in undergrad.
mm,
Um, and they're like, either previously exited founders in their late 20s, early 30s, whatever. And they've either scaled venture companies, they've got acquired, they've led divisions at places like Google, etc. And it's like if you're within the founding ecosystem or like entrepreneurial ecosystem, there's a natural forcing function which allows you to find similar people.
Mm.
Um, I'd say for like the bell curve median of students, um, yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with people just like trying to figure out what they want to do. But I think if you're intrinsically very motivated and driven towards a certain objective that's predefined for you based on experimenting a bunch and before going to university, then I'd say there's like a natural forcing function which is present that helps you self-select for those who you want in your network. Um, if you are like I say like the things that I do on a more normal basis that other university students do. Like I mean, I spend time with friends, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's um, yeah.
Perfect. Lovely. Um, I'll come back to something you said much a while ago on the episode, but which just struck me now is you've got a fabulous alumni network from UBC, people who have actually built unicorns in the life sciences. Curious whether in any way have you leveraged the alumni network, and have you been speaking to such people running these companies, and have they been guiding or mentoring you in any form?
Yeah, so I'd say the alumni network at UBC it's very big. Um, I've got the opportunity to like leverage a few members here and there, and they've been great. But I think probably for the company right now, we want to work with mentors who are like I guess like yeah, generally speaking, there's plenty of good mentors who are mentoring us. Um, yeah, to be honest, I just don't think we're at like the at like a far enough stage where we can like because we're still like very early on the company's journey. Um, so I think like later as time progresses, we leverage more of like the people who've like founded unicorns and stuff like that. But like right now, it would sort of be uh, like we would gain insights, but the thing is like they're not within our industry. Like a lot of these companies are unicorns in UVC are mostly on the therapeutic side. And I'd say like the more problems that we need help on, advice on, would probably be more fundamental like business and operations questions, which comes when we're like really scaling really quickly. And at that point, that's when that network would be valuable. But right now, it just frankly would be a waste of their time to help us like guide us at this stage, especially those people who have like scaled these just because it's in a different area, right? Like we speak to a whole bunch of people in diagnostics who've like scaled companies at a very large level or have gotten them acquired, and we speak to them all the time in terms of their founding journey and stuff. It's just that industry context does matter a lot in deep tech because it varies so significantly. It even varies company within your own industry. So
Mm.
um, yeah, like the only commonality that you can probably draw from is like operations, like hiring good people or scaling fundamentals and stuff like that. That's at a later stage. So, but overall, we've been able to leverage like the alumni network for our context to a very high extent. So, especially on research ends. So,
I mean, maybe sometime in the near future when you're actually in the scaling and the growth mindset, I'm sure it'll come
yeah.
in. It's a resource there which you can tap into whenever. Um, Want to talk a little bit about your course specifically about biomedical engineering at UBC? I'll start with perhaps a very basic question from someone like me who's a total beginner in the field. What's the difference between your course and just a typical biology or a medicine course which someone studies?
Um, I guess that this is more of a question. What's the difference between engineering and science? Like I'd say, I think I forget if it was like a quote by Neil Armstrong, but I remember seeing this video at a very like when I was in I was going into my sophomore year over the summer after I finished my freshman year in high school. And the way that I described it was uh, science is pretty much like the study of what is already here, and engineering is what science can be, or broadly, what was the application of it. Um, like engineering deals with more of like the so what factor um, of things. That's what I found, and I guess take what I say here with a grain of salt because it varies so significantly between what you're doing. I'd say like if you're the physical sciences, like if you're doing physics or if you're doing applied math or applied physics, like applied physics, you're basically just doing engineering, like a very broad engineering degree speaking. But yeah, like I say like for biomedical engineering, you learn equal amount of rigor at any general biology degree. We have a bunch of jokes at UBC where we have like, oh yeah, this course is basically 4 years of a biology degree in one semester. So like it's like you have like yeah, you're able to like gain a lot of insights on the molecular stuff as well as like the cellular stuff and the biochemistry stuff. At the same time, you have to learn a whole bunch of applied physics and math um, in terms of understanding how to build medical devices, exploring biological phenomenon, et cetera, to create novel therapeutics, um, to even understanding how to build like MRI machines or medical devices focused. So I am not very sure on what the context of like a pure biology degree, what it consists of in undergrad. Obviously, it's very different from grad school, like compared to medicine and stuff. But I said that's like what the reason why I like biomedical engineering. You get to learn these foundational principles, and then using math and physics, you're able to come up with these models which can help you figure out good solutions towards these problems. Yeah.
In your case, specifically for the company, I'm sure there must have been basic business skills you had to learn with sales or finance or basic economics. Did you take classes at UBC for that, or is that something you just more picked up while doing or through mentors?
Through mentors and by doing it myself, I'd say. Actually, this is one of the opinions which I'm like very hard set on. It's like the fact that like learning business in quotation marks in school, like I personally for me, I don't find much value in it. And speaking to a lot of my mentors, it's like you will fundamentally learn more about business by doing it yourself than you will in school. Business is one of those things where I just find it very hard to make the argument for going to business school. Unless there's a very specific reason that you want it. Like for instance, if you want to go into hardcore finance, like investment banking or private equity and like buy side private equity, and stuff like that, then only I'd say it makes sense because otherwise it's like unless you're so it's funny like either you can do like an undergrad in business and go ahead and work in investment banking, or you do applied mathematics and do the same thing. So there's I guess you're doing applied math. You're more on you're mostly going to work for quant, but yeah, I'd say like broadly speaking, I think I've learned a lot of the business stuff from talking to other business founders, and I'd say general knowledge of business comes from talking to people who are like not even within your field. So yeah, there's information exchange. I'd say that's like the best way to learn business from other founders, and then just doing it yourself. Like you'll run into so many fires that you don't know what the hell to do with, and you figure out ways to go around these problems by sort of being relentless and just learning from others and trying to implement and see what works and iterating very quickly.
Very interesting opinion. I'm curious if this is actually a mindset shift for anyone listening to the podcast who's interested in going to business school for undergrad. I think this is just an interesting perspective to keep in mind from someone who's running his own business. Curious if you ever feel that your curriculum, I'm sure biomedical is a space and a field which is rapidly evolving. And I'm sure I'm not well read, but I'm sure there are new innovations and new patterns which continuously come up. Do you ever feel like the curriculum you're being taught in school is in any sense outdated? Or is it just those fundamental concepts which will remain in some sense timeless?
So it's funny because like UC, especially on like the stem cell bioengineering side, is the one who is advancing the field in most cases. And that's like the advantage of being part of like a really big university is like they are advancing like a lot of like the engineering work. Um, and yeah, like generally, professors are very in tune in terms of what's going on within their fields. So undergrad, you learn a bunch of fundamentals, um, and if you have, again, it all comes down to your own ability, your abilities to be agentic enough to sort of like figure out what's currently going on in the field and just asking professors about them and going more deeper into it. Um, so I say to that, no, like I honestly haven't felt that like anything that had been taught at the University of British Columbia has been outdated. Like UBC is very good at doing that, like keeping their curriculum up to date. Uh, Granted, it's not as quick and fast as like it depends on your context. Like it's not like for instance, if you're trying to study something like AI and stuff like that, you're probably better off at Stanford than you are at UBC, um, or even Waterloo. You're better off at doing that sort of stuff. Um, Especially at least at the undergrad level. Grad school level, I'd say it's more of a tie. At least most of this goes on more of a tangent, but I guess most of AI has been invented by Canadians. But yeah, there's there's that. Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. One more question to wrap up this longer section, part two of the podcast, which is all about your university days and university life, especially for all the biomedical, biology listeners of the podcast. For you specifically, I'm sure you approach a lot of highly dense texts throughout both class readings as well as university preparation. When you're approaching a super dense text like a dry, heavy PDF full of jargon or a research paper, can you just walk through how you actually break it down and how you actually understand and engage with such a text?
Yeah. Um, Generally speaking, I have like a remarkable tablet, and I just like write down key topics. Like I think like the only way to go about doing it is just like you have to really like you have to really enjoy what you're reading, and you have to like write notes down based on the research paper. So what I usually have is like on my computer screen, I'd have the research paper or textbook, and then I'd have me writing down notes, stuff like that. Textbooks, the best way to absorb those, just like at least like physics and math textbooks, or even biology and chemistry textbooks. Like actually, like most technical textbooks is just to solve the problems which are given there. Um, Unless you're looking at an experimental protocol or like a fabrication textbook and stuff like that, then you have to really go in depth and do things. And in those cases, like the argument is like it's better to just like build them in person and learn and then reiterate from what the principles in the textbook tell you. Um, that's my process at least. And this is something that I struggled with a lot, especially in high school. I wish I'd like this is like the only thing that I'd say that I've learned about myself that I could have learned sooner and implemented quicker. Is just simply how I absorb information the fastest. So
Mm, interesting. Awesome. It's been a lovely conversation. We'll bring it to a wrap. So just a quick segment on I'm just curious in the direction you're heading in with a degree in biomedical plus a successful venture. What do you see yourself doing about 3 or 5 years down the line from today?
yeah, it would pretty much be continuing with this company regardless, and really just trying to scale this forward. Um, because I believe the impact that we can have is generally impacting the lives of billions of people in the world. So that's pretty much like the main reason why I want to continue with this company. And sort of go ahead and scale it even after undergrad. Um, yeah, I say that's what I definitely want to do, at least within the next 3 to 5 years. Yeah.
What's the next big milestone you're hoping to hit? Could be technical, could be non-technical.
Yeah, I'd say right now we just want to scale our product and get into the hands of consumer, like get into the hands of like our customers as soon as possible. So hitting the necessary technical and non-technical milestones both on the business development side, as well as like laboratory research engineering side is top of mind right now for us.
Perfect. We'll move on to the fast fire round of questions. So this is my personal favorite section of the podcast. We'll just be asking you a few quick questions, and you can also feel free to answer in just one short phrase or one short sentence. So would love to start with, this has been a biochemistry filled episode. So far in your studies of biomedical and at UBC, what's been one concept that's been the most challenging for you to understand?
I don't know about, well, actually, let's see. I say the most challenging and fun concept that I had to learn was like in our biophysics class, we pretty much had to model how like a ligand or like a chemical agent from like a certain area of the cell membrane would diffuse through to another portion, and at the same time, while it's diffusing, it would undergo a chemical reaction. And pretty much you had to model using sets of differential equations what that would look like as a function of the distance. So learning how to apply quantitative, like physics models towards biology, that's been super cool and fun to learn.
Lovely. Any exceptional self-help or professional development or anything related to business, startups, any great book which you'd recommend to any young adult?
This is going to be like the most like very cheesy recommendation, but it's a good book, and I didn't realize that at the time, but I think it was like the best business book that I read when I was like in my freshman year of high school, which was How to Win Friends and Influence People. It taught me basically how to network, and I think that's yeah, that was a very very good book to read. There's a whole bunch of good business books, but I think if I were to select one, it would be that as well as 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. That's also a classic.
Yeah, I second both the recommendations. How to Win Friends and Influence People might seem old, but a lot of the wisdom is just timeless. And it might seem simple, but just very applicable and practical. Like if you can apply that, I think you've like learned how to network. If you can apply every concept in the book.
Yeah.
A mindset or a specific worldview or just a way of approaching things and solving problems which has really served you well over the last few years?
I guess mindset being very open-minded, growth mindset oriented, and thinking from first principles and just being a definite optimist helps a lot.
Just for
like fundamentally, like the world will get better if you put effort into making it better.
Just for anybody who's first time encountering first principles is when you said it on the podcast, just briefly, what is first principles and why is it a valuable mindset to have?
Thinking from first principles is just basically like understanding what is the way that I interpret it. What is the most fundamental ground truth that is like objectively true, and then building up from there. That's what thinking from first principles is. It's a really good way to break down problems. Like what is like absolutely 100% like indispensably true, and then going from there. Yeah, and like just knowing your first principles, like what, like how does like on an engineering level, what this would look like is just like, again, there's like a very broad generalization, but knowing physics very well can help you solve a lot of tough engineering problems, and asking the right questions is also a huge component of thinking from first principles. So yeah, thinking from first principles is it's uh it's a good skill to build.
Sure, I'm sure it is. I mean, we both learned it at the Knowledge Society, TKS, also a great program for any high schoolers listening. But I think practice, 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 and this is a skill that again sounds so simple, but will literally change the way you look at the world and solve any problem that you come across. Last of the fast fire round, any quote that has just stuck with you over many years, which you'd like to share with listeners?
I think Elon Musk actually one of his earlier interviews. I think he said I don't exactly remember what he said, but like it was something along the lines of like if you need motivation to do something, it's better that you don't do it. And I think I'm a true believer in that. So like you have to find something that you're just so naturally driven by that it's something that nobody has to tell you to do. You just do it by yourself naturally because you love to do that so much. Um,
Wonderful. And I think I'll just say that this has been one of the more challenging episodes I've had to host, but in a good way, just because your answers are not direct, even to like a simple fast fire question. I feel like on the spot, you're really thinking deeply and not just giving me an answer, but it's also made me think and reflect a lot over the episode. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm sure listeners also, I'm hoping that they've had a similar experience throughout this episode. We'll wrap up with just lastly, if you had to leave one message or piece of advice for anyone younger than you, so someone currently in high school who's about to embark on this journey of university and then life at large, what would the one message be?
Generic advice, but find what you really, really want to do, um, and experiment a bunch when you're young. Um, yeah, I'd say that's my two pieces of it. Like that's my piece of advice, and like don't get discouraged at the first science challenge. Like just because something is hard doesn't mean you're not good at it. It doesn't mean that it's not your passion or something. Like it's actually there's one book recommendation here, which would be good for this. Just read the summary of what Mastery by Robert Greene talks about. I think that's like a good way to figure out what you really want to do. But the TLDR, figure out what you were intrinsically driven at from a very young age and extrapolate from there. That's how you find your true calling, I guess.
Wonderful, wonderful. Um, I think to be honest, when you said that, the podcast came to mind for me. This is something I've been intrinsically driven to do, and I feel like I've not, as you said, the Elon Musk code, I've not had to motivate myself to do it. Versus a lot of other things where I have to motivate myself to do it. So I can see this applying well to my life, and I hope listeners can see where this applies to their life. But great advice. So brilliant. I say this for all our episodes, but all great conversations. Unfortunately, I, as a host, am very sad to put them to an end, but they have to come to an end. So, wrapping up this conversation, if anyone after listening to this episode is just mind blown or wants to contact you with further questions or follow ups, or just wants to connect in general, what's a good way to reach out?
I have Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Yeah,
I can put
yeah, it's like the best way to reach out. Yeah.
Perfect. We'll put links in the description. So thank you so much for your wise words on University Unraveled. An absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. It was a very different, unconventional episode, covering a lot of bases from someone who's running a startup as well as attending university full time and enjoying both of them. But thank you so much, Neil Mitra.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, Arya, and thank you for having me.
All right, that was the episode. To all the young listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you feel more energized, inspired, and curious for the exciting university journey that lies ahead. Stay tuned. Many more wonderful episodes to be released on Uni Unveiled across a diversity of majors, countries, institutions, and speaker profiles. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Uni Unveiled. This podcast is just a small part of a much larger initiative undertaken by my family called Serene Strokes to spread positive sparks of growth, transformation, and joy among all our audience. Check out our official website www.serenestrokes.com. In the description and comments, please feel free to share other topics and questions which you would love to hear about from our different speakers on this podcast. Until then, take care and remember that this big word, university, may not be as scary or as intimidating as you think it is. Thank you for listening to Uni Unveiled.